We live in a moment where AI is no longer just answering our questions, it's also taking actions. So it's browsing the web, calling the APIs, writing code, and accessing enterprise data, often with minimal human interventions. So that shift from passive to autonomous agent is one of the most exciting developments in our field, but it also opens the door to a new class of security risk that our existing frameworks were simply just never designed to handle. So today's discussion sits right at the intersection of that, where we have AI capability meets governance responsibility. And there is no one better to guide us through it than our speaker, Mahesh Kumar, who is also a senior data and AI engineer at Google, where he specializes in advanced agentic AI systems, predictive analytics, and large scale data strategy. He leads cross functional initiatives to build robust, responsible AI architectures that tackle some of the most complex challenges in the industry today. He's joining us independently today. I'm Samarpita, your host for today, and a data practitioner and also a volunteer with InfoSec Relations. And Mahesh, it's wonderful to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Would you like to quickly share like two lines about yourself before we get started with the set of questions that we have prepared for today?
Yeah, sure, definitely. My name is Mahesh Kumar Goyal. As you mentioned, that I've been in the data space for almost 15 years. I've been working with a series of customers to solve their data problems. In the recent time, I'm working with a lot of large customers to solve their agentic solutions. At the same time, identify what could be a potential use case to solve with the agents and the framework that we are seeing in the modern time.
Thank you. So we do have a couple of questions to run through you today. The first one being, how significant is the threat of data leakage in autonomous AI agents compared to traditional application security risks?
Yeah, if you see the current market space or how the technology is moving, it's much bigger because as we have seen that the traditional apps, what we've been building so far in last 30, 40 years, right, these are all predictable and they're stateless. But if you talk about agents, they are not, they're not predictable sometimes. Depending on how the LLM reacts, how it interacts with the tools, it can have a various ways or the various path which it can follow. At the same time, agents have memory. They take the real actions, and they also move data across multiple systems. And most of the time, they don't have human in the loop. So that's where as we see that the systems where we knew about how the data is gonna be moving, it was much more easier to predict how we wanna secure it. But with this agentic system, it's much more difficult because it's very complex. At the same time, it does interact with the various systems, and all of this technologies that has been built in last few years are more advanced and haven't looked back into how we're gonna be securing it. So the security systems are weak. At the same time, these agents are very strong to interact with any of the systems that we have been building for last 40 years.
Right. Okay. So that really sets the stage for us. And it sounds like the scale and unpredictability of these systems is actually what makes them fundamentally different, right? Which brings me to ask you then, what makes agentic AI systems uniquely difficult to secure from a data governance perspective?
Yeah, so as I already mentioned that these agents are non-deterministic, right? So we don't know whether it's going to be accessing a tool. And there's many of the times since there is no human in the loop, we don't know like what kind of access it has. How do usually the access management, what we have seen in the past would starts with the user, and then from system to system interactions would happen. But with these agents, this since all of these practices have been built and it's very lot of companies, they have their separate data strategy, they have their separate modernization strategy, and the AI strategy is different. So this AI strategy altogether does not follow any of the data governance or the other practices we have built across data. So that's why there's a blur. These agents usually have blurred data and control planes. At the same time, the document they read, it can become instruction. They also read a lot of log files. They also read a lot of trace information, personal information. There's a there's a blurred line between what is a code and what is a data for an agent. So that's why the systems we had in the past, which allows like role-based access control, which allows column-based access control, least access privilege, cryptographic boundaries are very different to apply on, or very difficult to apply on these agentic AI systems. We definitely need an altogether a set of systems which would be built for agents, not for data, because the data, what we have seen, it just sits on a place and then we use it for various like intelligence purpose. So the data, wherever you have data, either it's an operational or you generate some intelligence out of it. And based on the personas and based on the applications, we divide or we decide how we want to grant the different sets of set of access, how we want to define the governance boundaries, how we want to make sure there is a quality out of it. But with this agent, since it's pretty much non-deterministics, we do have to design or think about how do we want to make it more governed. And all the systems that we have seen so far, the sensitive data protections, or the how we want to protect using some of the advanced controlling on top of data, we may have to come up with different approach or flow for agents. Like the LLMs can access tools, the tools will access sub agents, then from there it goes to an external API, so it can have a different path. So that's where, I mean, we have to come up with a system which hasn't human in the loop. At the same time, it does identifies makes some kind of a deterministic approach for all the agents to follow a specific set of governance.
So the challenge isn't just technical, then it's about the dynamic reasoning nature of these systems. Given that, I have to then ask you another obvious question. Are current enterprise security architectures prepared for autonomous AI workflows?
Yeah, I would say it's mostly not, because all the systems that have been built are for standard applications that has been used across organizations. For example, EDR tools are built to detect anomalies in the systems or your web traffic or in the human behaviors. But the agent that runs code perfectly, maybe like 100,000 times, it can make a mistake on the next occurrence. And that's where, I mean, to identify a specific anomaly in the agent is very, very tricky compared to identifying the anomaly in traditional systems. And all the systems like IAM, RBAC, DLP assumes that there's a human or like static service which are behind all of these operations. But with the agents, these are dynamic. There are sub agents, there are like MCP tools. They sometimes, and there's a lot of context and memory within the agent itself, right? I mean, it runs over a period of time, and then the way it builds the memory is quite a difficult to identify like where would be the problem coming from. So that's why the security systems what the current enterprise use, I would say they are not ready for or not prepared for the autonomous AI agents or the workflows. There are some initiatives or some stack that are pretty much modern, and they follow some of the practices that we were discussing, like agent to agent protocol, and some of the protocols that's been built for MCP are bit standard. There's another that I've seen is very popular is the model armor that prevents for any the prompt injection. It looks for SQL injection. So those are the solutions that are getting more popular, but at the same time, to have a wider enterprise adoption is going to take some time as well.
Right, yeah. So that honestly is kind of a wake up call for a lot of organizations, I would say. And one threat vector that keeps coming up in this space is prompt injection, right? So I'd love your take on this now.
If you see, the SQL injection has been one of the foundational or the fundamental problem we had for a very long time, right? And since with this AI agents, even though you have like series of prompt, or it has long-term memory, the agents have long-term memory. One malicious prompt can like poison the entire memory, the entire history that agent has been following. It can be either a
Mhm.
smaller output of a subprogram or a sub agent which agent was not expecting. So that can completely derail how agent was making the progress. And the SQL injection had a clean pattern, right? We know that what kind of SQLs would come. We had a lot of semantics to identify the SQL. The SQL maybe have a where clause, or it may have a join condition that could result to an injection. But with the LLMs, with the prompts, it's much more difficult because it's a human, it usually a skill or a human text that, or human natural language text, which may be coming from the user. Even though from the word by word perspective, there is this no vulnerabilities will be able to find, but the meaning wise or from the context wise, it can have a all different meaning that can create problem how this the AI workflows would run. So I mean, yeah. So eventually, this the SQL injection would become a prompt injection. I mean, the prompt injection would become a bigger problem, and we definitely need like series of tools or technologies to make sure that there is a filter in prompt or there's an architectural control. For example, we have like sandboxing the providence to make sure that okay, we test all of this prompt that goes to a production systems and make sure that there is a limitation or a boundary where it verifies that this prompt has been done in the past. So we need a different set of enforcement or an agent gateway to make sure that this prompt there's no I mean we can prevent the systems from the prompt injections.
How should then organizations approach context isolation and memory protection in AI agents?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and that's one of the problem right now. I mean, if you see across different organizations, right,
Mhm.
uh, they're just treating the memory of an agent as in like short-term memory. But one of the solution that usually I'm seeing in the market right now is that treat memory like a database. So we had to make sure that this data that we have as part of the agent is we encrypt it, we scope it down like who has an read access on this, who hasn't write access on it, and then we have a way to version control it. The same time, we had to make sure that the one user session does not contaminate other user sessions. So that would be to make sure there's an isolation between the different sets of user that runs across the different company. Another option that I see very frequently is we need to make this memory ephemeral. So if it stays for a certain period of time, it can stays throughout the lifetime of an agent. So that if there is a way that the data was or the prompt was injected, it cleans out after a period of time. And having
Mhm.
the scoped context window, having a summarization of your the context to make sure that the summary is not poisoned or the summary still aligns with how user has started this agent, right? That would definitely play a major role as we move forward with this agentic workflows.
Thank you. So, my next question then would be like, what are the biggest misconceptions enterprises currently have about securing LLM based agents then?
Yeah, so one of the common challenge what we have seen is that the people think that or the companies think that the guardrails or the monitoring systems or any of the tooling that they are using for observability is good enough for agents as well. They might be good just to monitor the infrastructure of the agents, like where agents have been deployed, where are they have a good source control or not, whether this is right
Mm.
DevOps pipeline or not. But if you talk about the task or the flow within agents are not able, they're not able to secure with this existing systems. The people or the organizations thinks that agents are just in smarter script, but that's not reality. Most of the time the agent can uncover a certain aspect from your data set or certain aspect from your entire code base which human was not able to do in last few years. So the agent can do it in a few minutes, so it's much more smarter than what we think as in script. Apart from that, we always start building technologies or tools first, where even it's about like if you use agents or any of the agentic workflow, we start deploying it, start making it production ready, but we think about security at a later point of time. So that's another misconception that they think that they can make the agent secure at a later point of time. So having this
Yeah.
all of this, some of the misconceptions that industry has right now, that could really be a chain or a way that the attackers can definitely find a way to corrupt or go for the prompt injection on the agents.
Well, then, what governance controls should be mandatory before deploying autonomous AI agents in production environments?
Yeah, so if you see some of the recent announcements from the Google as well, right? What we have done is that we came up with a centralized agent inventory, right? So that's one of the core principle right now. All the organizations should follow that. They should have central repository where they manage all of this agentic systems like their MCPs, their RAG, all the agents that they run across different organization. There should be a centralized repository for it, and they should have a right set of owners, purpose, data classification, security practices, what kind of tools they can access. The scope should be narrowed down. At the same time, there should not be a. We should ensure that what's the blast radius for any of this agent exploitation. And if there's an agent gets exploited specific to an organization department, then does it impact the other side of the world or not? So there should always be an kind of estimation on top of what's the blast radius for any of this agent which can get exploited in case in the future. And apart from that, for governance, we one of the recommended practice would be to have their own cryptographic identities. Make sure that they have their own set of key pairs to for any of this. If you want to encrypt any of this prompt that's been triggered on the agent, it has its own set of key pair. It's not shared with the other agent, because that's where there could be a chance that, or a scenario that this key can get exposed. And the similar principles that we had in the past, like the least privilege tool access, network segmentations, and making sure that the most critical task or any critical task within the agent goes through the human in the loop approval. So if that is always in the place, we can make sure that the governance or any of this autonomous AI agents can run freely in the production.
Since we are talking about explosions and exploitations, then should AI agents operate under zero trust principles, and are existing IAM and RBAC models sufficient, or do we actually need agent specific permission architectures now?
Yeah, so the zero trust only makes sense when we make sure that all of this agent process or the actions that it runs are authenticated, also authorized, and verified, regardless where they're coming from. So even if you start a prompt with an agent, we need to make sure that this prompt does not have any injections. This aligns with what this agent is built for. If there's a persona-based agent, we need to verify that this prompt is definitely makes sense for what this agent has built for. It's not going to be providing an outcome or answer which is different from the core purpose of the agent. At the same time, as we narrow down these agents based on their cryptographic identities, we build the short-lived tokens which can run for a certain period of time. For example, if I want to do an MCP authentication or access the data from an API or a database, right? For that use case, we know that, hey, this query would run for like certain minutes only, not more than that. So we can have short-lived tokens or any kind of MTLS authentication, which can make sure that all the security practices that we follow traditionally to make sure that this definitely a decoupled authentication in place, that would really helpful rather than having a hard coded API keys or having a config file which has all the information or API keys which would be plugged in with the agent. So that's the one of the core challenge that we have seen, especially with the large companies as well, that they accidentally leak all their code base because they had or the API keys that was part of either a log file or a test case, and that would really help with all of that security. I mean, if we have like zero trust, if you want to follow the zero trust or any of the like agent to agent calls, we need to make sure that even it's an agent to agent, there is an authentication in between to make sure that it only gets the output that it is looking for. And the downstream agent has its own memory context, or if that memory context is poison, it may impact the actual agent which is accessing the data from the sub agent as well.
So, Mahesh, since you have spoken about the guardrails that we need to have around all these systems and also the governance principles that we need to follow, I would like to kind of ask one last question to you, which has two parts to it. Basically, what security capability do you think will be foundational for enterprise AI agents over the next 3 to 5 years? And what advice would you actually give to the organizations deploying agentic AI and handling sensitive data today?
Yeah, so I think we already discussed about what challenges we seeing as an industry and what are some of the solutions which are like popping up right now. Not all of these are very popular, but overall, as we see, these are getting more attentions. At the same time, a lot of big companies like Google, Claude, they're talking about how we need to secure the agents and how we. I was watching a video sometime back, and then about from Claude, which talks about how we need to prompt, and I just realized that all this time I've been prompting it wrong. So there's a
Mhm.
change, or there's always the large companies are providing us a way that what we need to do to make the data, the sensitive data that we have within our nation, more secure with this agentic deployment. So the first of all, I'll start with making sure that we have an inventory for all of this agents or the tools, configurations, or any systems that we built for AI, and how all the governance in terms of who has access to this right set of tools, which agents can access which sets of tool. At the same time, all of these agents have their own identities in terms of they secure their all the communications that they do within the agent. At the same time, outside of the agents to tools, to make sure that okay, there's a blast radius. We understand if there is if the system compromises, what does gets impacted. So that's another assessment that industry has to do. Apart from that, have an unique agent identities. Make sure that there's a least access or the privilege has been given to the tool or to the users. There's a runtime monitoring where we need to make sure that the sensitive data protection is always running to make sure that we are not the agent is not getting access to sensitive data. Even if it is getting, it's not exposing that agents the sensitive data outside of it. And human in the loop is always very critical, no matter how big or how complex the agent goes, or if it is solving most complex problem that human used to do in the past, there has to have certain level of human in the loop to make sure that it does not actually go beyond what we are looking for. If the agent has been built for a
Mhm.
specific task, is it able to do that? Or if it's that this in high, sometimes we are able to run finance with the finance assessment with the large agents, right? If the agent is missing one digit out of a finance calculation, it can make 10 million into 100 million. So those kind of aspect where there's a high volume of risk involved, the human is always required to validate all the informations. So yeah, so that these are some of the things that I you see in the market as well. That's been like in the talk. A lot of big companies, small companies, they always talk about how they want to provide the solution tooling to make sure that the agents are not biased. The systems are you have your golden data set to verify all of this before you actually go and deploy this on the production.
So there has to be standard measures in place to kind of have them secured. Mahesh, thank you so much for your time and insight today. So the clarity you have brought to prompt injection, memory governance, and zero trust principles for AI agents is exactly what the space kind of needed. And also conversations like this are how we kind of start closing that gap. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Cool.
Cool.